Hey, you're live.
We're back. Another
Hamadi,
round.
Hamadi Hump Day.
Hump day.
What's quickly becoming my favorite day of the week.
Yeah.
Wednesday. Yeah,
It's
Wednesday.
nice. Well, especially today. It's like right before the 4th. So
Yep.
like tomorrow's a day off. Is this your last thing of the day?
This is not quite my last thing of the day, but it's close to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
All my meetings wrapped up about an hour ago, and we actually had bee removal at the house. So we had a giant bees. We had a
bees.
swarm, like a swarm the size of a basketball, trying to establish a hive in the house.
A beachhead.
Yeah. These guys came out, they vacuumed them up and sealed up everything. It was exciting, you know. So.
That's the picture that Marissa had set. Is the beehive? Okay,
the
I
bees.
gotcha. Yeah,
the bees.
Well, so we did have some good feedback for our debate night.
Oh yeah, what'd they say?
Yeah, just people enjoyed it. They're like, this was fun. It was respectful. Good diversity of opinion.
It's pretty chill. We weren't yelling at the screen.
Yep, none of that. I did hear some very good conspiracy theories in the aftermath that they on purpose set him out there with didn't give him the right drug cocktail, so that he would look terrible, and then they could have this orchestrated call for him to get off the ticket.
So I guess I should start my my reaction to that by saying that I was wrong. So if you remember my
this is a rare moment, people.
No. I'm wrong often. But anyway, so when we started, we gave some predictions, and I said I don't really anticipate there being any change in polling numbers afterwards. Like we've both of them been president for 4 years. We kind of know what to expect. We know. It was Dan Jan that said, "Oh, no. We're going to see like a 3.5 point bump for Trump."
Trump bump.
So I think what I had not realized, because like I've seen probably for the last 3 years now, kind of images of Biden being more or less not there. Him wandering off in the middle of press briefings, shaking hands with the air, having to be sort of led around, saying that he's not allowed to do stuff. Anytime you see him, he's only reading from a teleprompter. And even then, he sometimes reads his instructions. So he'll be like, such and such, repeat line, such and such. And it's just like,
right.
You're just reading it. It's like whatever's there. It's like, what is it was it Anchorman or something?
Yeah. Anchorman.
Where just has some just whatever's on the teleprompter, he says, and it's just like.
He'll read anything.
Yeah. So I kind of was like, well, yeah, I mean, so I'm watching him, and he's, he seems kind of feeble, and his voice trails off, and it's just like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the Biden that I'm aware of, but it seems like that is not what everybody else was aware of. And you've got all these shocked reactions, like, oh my gosh, he's, what are we gonna do? And I thought, and if you remember at the end, I was like, this sort of standard people who have been a Biden apologists are going to say, oh, he looked strong, he looked presidential, whatever. But they did not. In fact, you had, was it the guy on CNN who kind of gave this impassioned plea to, he's like, I love Biden, I support everything about him. I was like, wait a minute, I thought you were a journalist. No,
right.
You're right. I love everything about him. And that's why for the good of the country, like, you've got to step down, all this other stuff.
Yeah. You got the memo on the break.
Yeah. And so it was really kind of, I was very surprised, but I'm maybe not in that particular bubble so much. And so like, maybe if that's the only news sources that you've been getting, or that particular set of interconnected sources, that maybe it really was shocking. Like, you watch, you're like, wait a minute, what am I seeing? What's happening? So I completely underestimated that completely. It just, I was not expecting that at all.
Yeah. Surprising, right? So to me, that was surprising, like how unified it was. Like it was, to me, it's like it was
everybody.
So obviously orchestrated to me, like that's, I mean, when everybody's saying the exact same words, it's like, clearly this was a TPM that went out here, talking points memo.
Please say these things next.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of
superfluous. What was that word? Agree. What was the word that? Not gregarious.
Egregious.
Gratuitous.
Gratuitous.
Just gratuitous. Okay. Gratuitous. Yeah. Gratuitous. It's like, hold on a minute, dude.
Well, and I can't help but think, because I've seen a lot of mixed reactions from the establishment people. So like President Obama said, like, guys, he had a bad night. It's not a big deal. And several other people, Pelosi has showed support for him. So people who are very strong, very powerful within the party seem to be mixed. So I don't think it's as coordinated. I think maybe some of the bigwigs sent out a bunch of panicked tweets or maybe text messages, and so then everybody's just like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, now we have to talk about this. But there wasn't any
panic.
Not a real strategy. At least I don't see a strategy. Like, there's a bunch of now there's stuff like, oh, Biden is considering getting out of the race. Did Trump deliver a premature kill shot?
Knockout blow, right?
Like too early, like kind of stuff. And then other places are like, what are you talking about? White House denies this. His campaign sent, because I'm on his campaign mailing list, sent a very strongly worded email that was like, here's what you tell your friends about the debate. Like, it was like, but it was, I mean, it was not any kind of like backing down kind of stuff.
Right.
It was we're in this. And not only that, but I think the campaign also put out a statement that said that they were not going to release any money. Like, if the DNC tried to remove him, they were taking their war chest with them.
What are they going to do with that?
Well, I don't know. And I don't know how much that's going to matter, given how much, the amount of dark money that's out there.
Right.
But like, the stuff that's given to him stays with his campaign. And if he doesn't release it, it ain't getting released. So, I mean, it looks like kind of a mess. Like, they weren't really expecting that to happen. So, I don't know. Wild. Well, I guess we'll see next week. Maybe we'll have other things to say about it. But
it's going to be wild. It's going to be wild.
Well, I just love.
Going to be wild.
I just love that our guest not only won the bingo, but won the prediction. So. Hey. We should be listening to him. Like, why would anybody listen to us when we've got him?
Well, those are the perks of coming on our show, right? Like, you get to win all the games and you get to predict the future.
Yeah, it's like a kid playing chess with his dad. It's like, oh, you get to win. Yeah.
We defer reality to your predictive model. Yeah, I think it's really funny. I mean, like, to me, there are things that Biden could do, the campaign could do to get rid of this impression, and that's get out there and show people that he's actually functional. And for whatever reason, they don't seem interested in doing that. So I don't,
Well, I think they're kind of, there's limited options, because now if they
he's not functional, that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, if they trot him out there with the teleprompter, people be like, well, why does he like that? I mean, he doesn't have a teleprompter in his meetings. And if he is, who's writing what's on the teleprompter? Like, is it him?
But, I mean, people, I would think know that politicians don't write those words, with the notable exception of Trump says whatever,
says whatever he wants. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody's writing that,
But I mean, in general, like, if you, like, even someone like Clinton, there'll be, his speechwriter talked about like how many drafts of something would go back and forth.
Right.
So it's like, okay, here's. So it's like,
like I watch, I don't know if you saw, I think it's Netflix or something, but the West Wing came to Netflix, right?
Okay.
And
I saw the first season. I saw the first season, but I didn't go further than that. But.
Yeah. I mean, I love that show when it was on, but now watching it is almost like watching a black and white movie. Like, it is so quaint. It's like, all these different considerations and stuff. Like, that was when the government was run by professionals. This is, I mean, this is not, anywhere close to
Not
reality now,
anymore.
you know, like, and the whole like, oh, we can't do that because blah blah blah. It's like now, why not? It's like, who was talking the other day? Bill Maher. Oh, no, wait, it wasn't Bill Maher. Was talking about Al Franken. Somebody was talking about Al Franken and like how he was like,
The
former
senator.
The former senator. Yeah. If you'd polled all of the people that were in Congress, I mean, like who was the best senator, like overwhelmingly it would have been Al Franken, because like the guy was courteous, smart, intelligent, had mental plasticity, was able to like take the opposing side in crafting bills. Like he had so much legislation he had done under, like co-sponsored and stuff, because he was able to, and yet, this is the guy that was forced to resign or whatever. And
we got
the person that was this conversation, whoever it was between, the other person goes, well, he quit. He resigned. Like there nobody made him do that. Like he, the pressure was on and he resigned, because that's what you did back then. Right. But, fast forward, let's just 6 to 18 months after that happened, and you've got people that are like, I'm not going anywhere, good luck getting me out of here. I mean, before that, I mean, Marion Barry maybe was a good example of somebody who refused to, be shamed out of office. But used to be, you can't do that. All this, everybody's going to know. Who cares? Nobody cares. Like, I'm just going to stay here and, let the voters decide. I answer my constituents. Your constituents are all asking you to leave. Only the ones you've heard from. Yeah. And it's literally
their message. They can recall me or vote me out. That's it.
Yeah. And
I respect that. Like,
I mean,
the thing is that, the thing is with Franken, it's one thing to be pressured out and to resign for the good of the party when the governor is going to appoint someone to carry out your term that's from the same party. Right. So it's like you still have this continuity of governance, and it's like we're just going to remove someone who's going to get a lot of media attention, negative media attention, replace them with someone else, especially since at the time the Democrats were trying to position themselves as like the party of women, party that was more friendly.
Yeah, I'm not trying to go back and relitigate that. I'm putting that out as an example of, New York Times came out this week, a couple of days ago, and said Biden should step down. New York Times editorial page, Biden's got to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for the good of the party, the good of the nation, et cetera. And they're on one of the people from the editorial boards on some show. I think it was Morning Joe or whatever on Monday. They're like, how could you do this? Da, da, da. What about calling for Trump to resign from his, for the good of the country?
They already did.
And the editorial lady's like, we've done that. Like we've done that over and over again. And, New York Times, we at the New York Times are not, shy about like saying what we think should happen on that side. They're just, the only reason you think this is like somewhat relevant is because, we're supposed to be cheerleaders for that's ridiculous. Like we have to, everybody saw what happened, and we're calling for this, and we stand by that call, and there's plenty of time to do something about it. So I did hear some interesting take on, so if Biden steps down before the convention,
mm-hmm.
You have all these super delegates that can obviously do whatever they want. And then every delegate who is pledged to him through the primary process automatically becomes released. Like, so all of those are free agents, right, at the convention. And I think you got something like 4,000 delegates or something in the DNC. Or he could go to the convention, accept the nomination, and then a week later step down. And now you've got like, and I don't know who the people are, but there's like basically 5 or 6 people who would make that decision on who to replace him with, rather than 4,000 people. And I was like, knowing the Democrats, if that's true, and I don't know, I haven't looked into it. Maybe you do, but I'm like, knowing Democrats, they will screw that up and decide to do it behind closed doors somewhere. I mean,
I think
but who knows?
Very bad optics if they do, right? Like the party that's been trying to brand themselves. By the way, the Protect Democracy polling, Biden is now trailing Trump on which candidate that the public thinks will be able to protect democracy by something like 15 or 20 points.
I always laugh at those polls, not that result, but like, I mean, who says it's a good thing to protect democracy in the first place?
Right. But that's just, again, that's just, who do you trust more for that? But if Biden's replacement is selected in an undemocratic process, right? It's one thing to say, well, look,
right,
we voted for him in good faith. Here's our delegates, and they're going to have to work it out, and they're going to vote, and those are our delegates voting, right? That's sort of like, well, we can see sort of a chain of democracy happening. But if it's like like you're talking about, like the back room, cigar filled,
some anointing,
it's like, we've chosen this one, then then there's no democracy. Everyone's going to be like, well, I didn't pick that guy or that girl or whatever. It's going to be messed up. Plus, I think there's some legal problems with that, and a lot of people who kind of follow the mechanics of elections think that, and they've said this for a long time now, that any effort to replace Biden is going to be doomed, because he has to be on the ballot in all the states. And some of the states, including some of the battleground states, have already closed their eligibility. So unless Biden dies, he cannot be taken off the ballot in both Nevada and Wisconsin, which Biden will need to win, or at least without a very, very difficult electoral map. There's a few other states that are like this too, that have already passed. So they would need some kind of special session, change the law, change all this other stuff in order to do that. And, there was a lot of changes happening under COVID 4 years ago, but I don't think that we have the same kind of stomach for like, let's just change the rules to help, one party. So that's why a lot of people think like the Democrats are just stuck with him. Maybe he campaigns promising to pass the torch to Harris once he takes once he's reelected. I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out in a few weeks.
Yeah,
anyway.
Exactly. A few weeks. All right. Well, so on to today's topic, which is the raft of SCOTUS decisions that came out.
They always save the big ones for the very end.
Yeah, the last day. It's like the Friday press dump.
Yeah.
Contemplate this over the weekend.
And you know why. Some of these majorities, sometimes you'll see these really long minority opinions or like concurring opinions that two people join, that kind of thing. And some of those were the majority opinion. So there's like a 5-4 majority opinion, but then there was like, hey, look, if you write it this way, we can get another justice
6-3, right?
More established. And so then, like, a lot of these things happen at the very last minute. So anyway, so there's 4 big ones, I think.
Okay, let's hear them.
So one that is big, but I don't think we really need to talk about, is the one on internet censorship. And this is the way I can't remember, someone used the term, the censorship industrial complex. So what, there's always been moderation on social media, but that moderation became very focused politically during COVID. Like certain ideas seemingly just vanished from, or you would be punished if you talked about certain things. And a lot of people wonder, like, why is that? And I said, oh, well, Facebook or Twitter, whatever, that's their moderation policy, and they're private entities, so they can decide how they want to moderate. And over the remaining years, we found out that their moderation policies were the alleged part that says coerced, but at least we'll say highly influenced by the Biden White House.
Encouraged, I think, is the proper word you're looking for.
Yes,
strongly encouraged. Yeah,
encouraged with things like, we need a report. I had the quote pulled up. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Just because it's like, unless you see what this, let's see if I can find this real quick. This was in the dissent for the case. Oh gosh, I had it pulled up. Dang it. Sorry, man. Yeah. Let's see. So like they would send stuff saying, "Hey, you need to play ball. You need to send us a report showing that you're willing to take the steps that we want." Remember they would constantly refer to the January 6th riot, insurrection, whatever you want to call it, as something that Facebook didn't put a stop to. Like, the last time you didn't do what we said, we had an insurrection. You wouldn't want people died because of you. If you don't want to
awful nice country you have over there.
Yeah. And then every time they would talk about like, well, remember, we're gonna pursue we have a very strong antitrust system, and you wouldn't want to be targeted by an antitrust probe by the DOJ and all this other stuff. And so Facebook kept going back and be like, okay, I think we've done what you want. Like, here it is. Here's what we've done. They're like, well, why is this post still there? You only reduced the availability. You didn't delete it. I want to report about what your policy is about deleting posts versus just limiting their reach. And the Facebook's like, okay, fine, we'll delete it. It's like, and the Facebook's tone in all this is like, I mean, the conciliatory language,
helpful, conciliatory.
Please don't hurt us. Please don't hurt us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so basically, I mean, it looks a lot like coercion to me. It really does.
But the court kicked it back and said they're allowed to do that.
What?
The court kicked it back and said they're allowed to do that. Right?
They are allowed to do it. Well, no, not that they're allowed to do it, but that the plaintiffs don't get a preliminary injunction to stop them.
Right.
So it's like it's like it's right there, but it's like, well, we're just going to let the whole process play out first, and afterwards, once you get a final ruling, we'll see what happens. So
they don't have standing to sue right now because the case hasn't been decided.
Yeah, and that's one where I think that they actually do have standing on this. The
Supreme Court says they don't.
Well,
so they don't.
I know. It's one of those where I disagree with the ruling, but because I think the issue with the Supreme Court is like, well, who exactly are you trying to tell them to stop? Right? Like, you've sued Facebook, but you haven't sued. So Facebook is, that's not really your target. Your real target is these actors in the federal government, like people within the DOJ, through people in the CDC, people in the White House. But you haven't named them as suits in the suit. So who are we supposed to be stopping? Who are we supposed to be injuncting? So in that sense, it's like, okay, I get it. But as far as the coercion part, I don't know what else to call it. Like, it's just so, I mean, it's like mob boss style.
So I'm reading this book right now called The Year of Living Constitutionally. It's written by the same guy that did The Year of Living Biblically, where he attempted to live according to
the Old Testament Levitical
law for a year. And a really good book. I mean, it's pretty funny, actually. Pretty sure the guy's like a Manhattan Jewish dude, So like I listen to the audiobook. So just like his tone of voice and how he explains things is very funny. So then that inspired him to do this book on living constitutionally. All these people say, oh, that's not in the Constitution, or the Constitution doesn't say that. And basically he goes into, it's more of a performance art project for him, right? So like, I mean, wearing the tricornered hat and writing with a quill pen and like all these different things that he took on for the year. But he attempted to exercise every single one of his constitutional rights, including asking for a letter of marque from Congress so that he could be a privateer. But hey, it's in the Constitution. I have the right to ask for that. I have to do it. And so, and it's so funny, dude. I mean,
I would like to have a privately owned battleship.
No, it's a privateer. So like he actually leased his buddy's boat, a little ski boat, and said, once I get my letter of marque, it will be outfitted with cannon and whatever else,
Sure, yeah.
But obviously only weapons.
Once I've gotten that, yeah.
Once I have that. But anyway, so they're talking about he really does a good job of getting into like this whole debate over to oversimplify like the originalist interpretation versus the living Constitution. And I was surprised to hear that the whole idea of originalism didn't really come into being until the 80s when with Bork and all that, just prior to that
was the primary mover on that.
And it really just saying, look, we have an activist core. It really is it's a response to the Warren Court of all the liberal interpretations that they put out there. And conservatives got mad that they're legislating from the bench and all this stuff. And so we need to go back to an original. What did the founders actually want, right? And he does a really good job of just breaking down, like, well, I mean, is that even a smart thing to want? Like, I mean, who even cares what the founders wanted? Like, we're the ones living here now, And Jefferson said, like, the dead don't have any claim on the way the living, the world belongs to the living. And so it's kind of interesting. It's like so this has become kind of like a exercise in high priesthood, the way Catholic Church does it. It's like, yeah, we have the scriptures, but we also have church tradition, and so we have to go through here to find out, like, oh, this is the dispensation, on this one, like who's communing with these dead founders to find out what they think about this. And but it was interesting because he was talking about specifically free speech. And he deals with each one of the amendments kind of like, it kind of takes this either or thing. And he made a very interesting point, which I hadn't considered before. So, and again, thinking from an originalist standpoint, what is the intent of this amendment, this free speech amendment? What is the intent of that?
Go on.
So his argument is that the intent of that was so that the populace could be exposed to whatever ideas that they want, and having a fair marketplace of ideas and being able to see everything and speak about everything and debate everything, that now the populace is well educated and they can make informed decisions. In order to have informed decisions, you have to be informed. Therefore, you need freedom of speech, and you need to be the ability to put out whatever opinion that you want without fear of reprisal. Which I agree that is the point, right? So he's like, obviously censorship is a big enemy of free speech. Like that is the number one thing that you want to be on guard for. People are calling to, hey, that idea is no good. We can't have that one out here, or whatever the case may be. Like that's obviously an impediment to me being exposed.
Saying it's no good is fine. It's that idea should not be said.
Should not be aired, right? Yeah. But he made the other point too, which is that the founders at the time, like they could not have possibly imagined. I mean, since the advent, especially of AI, but even before AI, when you had bots and these troll farms and stuff, that the majority of the content that you're being exposed to is not even real content written by people that have thoughts, and it's so much misinformation and just downright, pardon me, bullshit that is put out there, right? And so is that also not an enemy of having a well-informed populace? Like if you can't go to the internet or whatever source of information and actually get true knowledge, like you literally have now a system where, I mean, we've talked about it multiple times. Like people, if you're in the bubble on the left, all you're getting is some information possibly, but mostly misinformation on a lot of these topics. Like you're just completely misinformed about what is going on. And so
same for the right
and on the right, like if you're on one of these right bubbles, I mean, like you literally, they did a study where, if you watch Fox News exclusively, you're actually worse informed than somebody that doesn't watch any news. Like that's how bad off you are. And so like
turn it off.
Turn it off. It's corrupting, rotting your brain, right? So I just thought that was a very interesting, like, so does
I guess just to push back on that, like, is that new? I mean, the era of muckraking journalism was the 1800s. During this 1700s, I mean, Andrew Jackson got into a huge deal with newspapers that were printing, as far as we can tell, lies about his wife and stuff. Like, but newspapers print lies forever. Like that's that's what they do, right?
Yes. But and whatever you want to do it. But like the difference is the scale and the easy access. Like, I mean, any run of the mill, you don't even have to be a hacker. I mean, you could, have AI write you a Python script and go to town, like, I mean, it is not.
Yeah. Well, and I think in this case, one of the issues that social media has brought up is this question of virality. So it's one thing to have a newspaper print a story and then another newspaper picks it up, but like some grandma can type whatever, and people retweet it or it gets shared, and it's like that becomes a shaper of the media narrative.
Well, for
maybe
example,
more so.
For example, like, and I've pointed this out to multiple people. So like when you're playing poker on the internet, for example, okay, and a lot of people are like, well, how can you trust these poker rooms? Like like they're it's how do you know they're not cheating you? And it's like, well, they don't have any interest in cheating you. Like, they have an interest, in fact, of making sure that they're certifiably delivering random deals because they want their tables filled. The more people that show up, the more tables they can generate, the more people playing that whatever.
Because they get a rake. They're not invested in any particular player.
Okay. So same thing about polls, right? If I'm running a poll, right, there's all these polls are skewed. It's like, I mean, they may be skewed, right? But they're not intentionally giving out bad information. Like the polling institutions have an interest in retaining customers who pay them to come up with actually accurate. So they have an interest in making sure that that's as accurate as possible, or else people will stop using it. Oh, that poll's stupid, right?
Sure.
Same thing with newspapers and editorial boards, right? Their interest is in maintaining subscribers and increasing subscribers. Like, oh, I have to get that reporting because that is really good reporting over there, or whatever the case may be. If they're constantly putting out misinformation. Now, I get some people, they use their platform for a political purpose or whatever.
Their job is reader engagement, viewer engagement.
Correct. That's right.
Yeah. So it's like you just have to make sure that they're entertained.
Is an audience for what? Okay, so there you go. Right. 100%.
It doesn't necessarily have to be true, right? It's like what my wife calls the news in the morning. It's like news themed entertainment.
Yeah, newsutainment.
Yeah, like it's fun. You get to watch people yelling at each other a little bit, but don't look at me like this is what's happening. This is real. Anyway,
okay. So
the thing is, though, that particular case, like I said, people are making a big deal about it. It's not ripe yet. I think next year we'll have something to say about that one.
So that was number one. What were the other three?
The other three, there's the January 6th and the meaning of obstruction.
Yep.
There's Loper Bright and Chevron deference. And then there's the Trump immunity one. Which one would you like to talk about?
Take them. Well, let's do Trump's immunity first.
Trump immunity. Okay. What have you heard? I'm just curious. I have not looked at any reporting on it. I've only read the Supreme Court, both the majority opinion and concurrences and the dissents. So I've read the whole thing.
I mean, to me, this one is not good news for Democrats by any means, but not good news for the people trying to prosecute Trump for these crimes. Like, that's not good news for them, right? On the other hand, I don't know that this is super controversial. Like, of course, the president cannot be. I mean, you can't go and sue people for the president for whatever because if it's in the course of doing his business. I mean, they basically said the president does have immunity for the official acts that he takes as president. He does not have immunity for things that are not related to his official duties. How is that controversial? Now the problem is that how they define, well, was this an official act or not an official act? Was it ancillary to an official act? Was it, I was doing this official act, which had the unfortunate consequence of doing this other thing so those things will have to be adjudicated, but I don't know that the effect of the decision is that it basically is going to derail, I think, two of the big cases against him. So I mean, that's good news for Trump. I don't know that it's kind of funny because, like I was listening to a couple of conservative podcasts yesterday, and they were actually a little upset that it was too good because now Biden would be able to use it to escape prosecution from, all of his Biden crimes or whatever the alleged Biden crime family is up to. They're not going to be able to go after him now, but whatever. Yeah.
Well, that was actually my reaction when I read it. It was like, because I'm hoping for like everybody to be in jail, and this is going to really stop a lot of that stuff from happening. A couple of things that are buried in it that I think your analysis there missed. So let me see if this is stuff that has shown up in the discussion out there.
I'm sure they were missed.
Well, no, but like
my attention to detail is not legendary, as you know.
Well, so if you read the majority opinion and the dissent is like, what's the big deal? Like the president already has immunity from like being sued, right? You can't just say, well, because of your action, I lost money, and so now you owe me. Like I can sue you. Like we don't have he's already immune from that. We're talking about immune from criminal prosecution, and why would you need immunity from that? I mean, first of all, you'd have to have a federal prosecutor that they have very high standards, and they would have to like bring the case, and then a grand jury would have to see the evidence and indict you, and then you have to go through the trial, and then you could bring evidence, and you'd have to have a jury of your peers convict you, and then there's an appeal, and after the appeal, look, you can get to us, we'll take the case. I mean, they even say in there like, why? I mean, we would take that appeal.
That is the conservative argument against why we don't need a hate crime legislation. It's like, but dude, there's already crime. So like, I mean, we don't need an extra designation for hatred.
Well, here's the interesting thing about it is what the dissent I think misses is that the style of prosecution that we're looking at now, I think we both agree, well, maybe not, but my impression of the Trump cases is that they're primarily political. He's being charged for things that
I disagree, but
you wouldn't be charged for otherwise. But anyway,
I do agree on the Stormy Daniels payout. Like that's absolutely political.
It's political.
Should have been charged a long time ago if they were going to go after it. So as
a misdemeanor and so on.
And I do also agree on the woman with the rape case. Where the judge came out and said, no, he's guilty of rape. But I mean, the fact that they opened that statute of limitations for one weekend so that she could get her case, I mean, that's obviously in my opinion,
shady.
That's shady. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think coordinating an effort to overturn the election, I don't see how that's not criminal, but whatever.
Well, so here's the issue though. The issue is, the way these prosecutions are done and the timing of them is they're not the end goal is not some kind of conviction, final conviction where this person has been adjudicated guilty. The point is to make them go through the process of the prosecution. That the prosecution
during an election year, in this case,
having to come up with these documents, flying over there, being subject to court orders. I mean, we had a couple of weeks where there was this whole thing about the gag order and, all this.
But none of that would be necessary if he was comporting himself with the dignity of somebody in a trial.
But that's not the point, though.
I mean, he's the one that's
I know. I'm not disputing that stuff. What I'm saying though is that the point of this is the prosecution itself is the punishment. Right. Even if he got off, even if he was innocent, or even if on appeal they overturned it, it's like, well, you've already been punished. We punished you. You spent millions of dollars doing this. You spent all this time. You had to do all these things. You had to be, there was all these news headlines that were available. Remember when? I don't know if you remember this.
I'll give you that point. I mean, I will give you the timing of them. Definitely is political.
Well,
so.
And not just
if they weren't, they would have brought them 4 years ago. So
remember when
3 years ago, pardon me.
Yeah. But like
give them a few months to get their act
like
together.
the raid on the Mar-a-Lago where they're like, we're gonna, they leak the pictures of the documents spread along the ground, even though it turns out now that was at least partially staged. And so it's like the prosecution, this is something that I've talked to our younger brother Brian about, who's in law enforcement. Is this concept of you might be able to beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride. Like the judge might let you go, but you're going to sit in jail for 24 hours while I wait for that to happen. You have to get a lawyer, and hopefully you learned your lesson. I just punished you, even though you've been adjudicated not guilty, or the case was dismissed by the judge later.
But here's everything you're talking about is in relation to this one set of events that's going on right now. This prosecution's agenda against this person, and the reality that we're seeing is that actually all of the ride, as you call it, is actually helping Trump. So it's not like, how is that a punishment? Like they just basically shot themselves in the foot. I don't, again, see why I do get the dissenting point of view
in this case. In this case, because Trump has the resources that he does, because of various things that are sort of specific to him, where like his notoriousness is part of his appeal, I guess, to his core.
Well, that he's made a deal with Beelzebub to
the more distasteful you seem, the more people want to vote for you. But that's not the case for everybody, right? So imagine a scenario, and this is what the majority does. Imagine a scenario where every president, when they leave, it's not so much about like, did I do anything that was against the law, but will my predecessor see fit to punish me by
your successor?
Oh yes, my successor will see fit to punish me by creating a prosecution that targets me for maybe many years, drains all my resources, opens up everything that I've ever done, like all the discovery on everything, all the embarrassing parts leaked. And it's like, oh, no problem, because, you'll be able to appeal it and we'll show, you'll be exonerated. It's like, yeah, but after years and years and years of this stuff, and who knows what is like, oh, well, and pursuant to this discovery, we found this other thing, which now we're going to charge. And it's like, you just go on these giant fishing expeditions and there's no limit to it. And just saying, well, just go through the prosecution isn't going to be good enough, because where we could say that about private citizens, like same thing could happen to either of us.
They could still haul them in front of Congress and subpoena them and whatever.
Yes,
they'll figure out another way to give them a ride if that's what they're looking to do.
But that will have to happen in quite a different way, right? So here's how they outlined it out. So you've got the core powers of the presidency. Now they have, by the way, the majority has a unitary executive style way of looking at it. If you read the opinion,
which explain that for people that don't know what that is.
Yeah. So this model is, and if you read the opinion, they're very clear about this. The executive branch simply is the president. The executive branch is the president, and then his power is delegated out to the people that he appoints for that job. Now, he has to appoint them with Congress, and of course, the powers that he has and how that's set up is established by Congress. So, he can't just create a new power for himself. Congress has to give him that power, and then he appoints someone to manage that for him. But all the authority of the executive rests in that one person, the president himself. The president is the executive branch. Okay, so the majority opinion is very clear about this. So if you look through Article 2, Article 2 lays out, as the part of the Constitution that deals with the presidency, lays out certain core powers that he has. They're not listed as, they don't say core powers, but they're listed as like, this is what the president does. Appoints ambassadors, has a vice president that is the president of the Senate, presides over the Senate. They can recognize foreign countries. They can veto legislation. They can offer pardons, right? These are listed out in Article
powers. Yeah. Not that many. Striking.
Not that many. Those powers are absolutely immune from prosecution. That doesn't mean that you can defend it if someone tries to prosecute you for it. It's that the prosecution cannot take place at all. So the president can never, under this majority rule, be prosecuted for who he pardons or who.
But we already knew that.
who she does any best. Well, no, because this was questioned before, where it's like, well, what if under the Clinton presidency,
yeah, he pardoned Mark Rich, whatever. I mean, like
he pardoned a whole bunch of people,
yeah.
And there was this thing. It was like, hey, this might be part of a cover up. This might be this. It's like,
too bad.
No, yeah, too bad. Before they said, well, we're not going to prosecute. We're not going to try to investigate that out of deference to the office. Of course, that doesn't exist anymore. There's no deference anymore. But now under this, it would be impossible. You simply couldn't do it, right? Couldn't even bring it up. Now, as far as the other things, you've got other official acts that are not part of the core powers, and you've got unofficial acts. Now, unofficial acts, no immunity. So if you yell at, if the president buys a new golf club and he doesn't like it and he yells at the person and like smacks him across the face, that is not part of your official actions. That is
still assault. That's still assault. Yep.
That's you. But they said for official actions, you have presumptive immunity, which means the court looking at it before they can even allow the prosecution to take place at all. They have to first establish that a prosecution of that kind will not impede the office, which is a very high bar.
Well, it's whatever we say it is, since we just made it up. So,
well, it's going to be a very high bar for any prosecution to clear, where you have to say not only did what they do was illegal, but that, I mean, it could be illegal and still say, but if we prosecute it, it would put too much, it would interfere with the powers of the president. And so the office of the president. And so we cannot allow the prosecution to go forward. So that is, I think, a very strong, very big hurdle. And then we say, well, what counts as official versus unofficial? The majority opinion says that they want the widest possible net around official actions, right? That the official actions include like what they call the outer perimeter. So unless it is the words they use are manifestly and palpably. So it's sort of like, it's just totally obvious that this is an unofficial act, right? Like him talking to his kids at the dinner table is an unofficial act. It's just so clearly and obviously an unofficial act, right? Or
unless his kids are in the cabinet,
or or picking out this or that sweater, unofficial act, right? But any tweets, any speeches, so the bully pulpit is one of the official acts of the presidency. So a lot of what you might think of as an unofficial act is like, well, no, it has this official sort of element to it, and so it would get included as an official act. And now here's the third part, and this is the part that I think is the one that probably destroys any prosecutorial case against Trump. If you're going to go after an unofficial act, you cannot reference official acts. So like, let that sink in for a minute, right? So we say, okay. So for example, him talking to the attorney general, even saying, do this or you're fired, right? Totally protected. That is an Article 2 power. And so it has absolute immunity. Any discussions he has with the attorney general, no matter how coercive, absolute immunity. And you say, well, in order to talk about this unofficial act where he talked to, I don't know, one of his campaign attorneys, that would be unofficial, right? Because it's him as the candidate, his campaign attorney. But if that references the discussion with the attorney general, then you've sort of smuggled in an official act into the unofficial prosecution.
Well, I mean, it's good, man. It's good to see the Magna Carta thrown out after all these years. It's nice. It's nice. I mean, this whole president not being above the law or whatever, like that we all knew that was crap for the last 1,000 years, but they finally got rid of it. So
here's the issue. Here's the issue. The 34 felony counts, right? The thing. Okay, that happened before he was president. So you think unofficial acts, right? But the prosecution's case relied a ton on official acts that were done while president, which means it's very likely that that conviction will be thrown out. which is why. What? Well, it's why the
just because marijuana is legal now doesn't mean everybody immediately gets freed from prison.
Well, the judge.
In fact, you can't even get felonies cleared off your record. That this guy in Maryland that just did that. I mean, that was so controversial, and that was crimes that were committed before they passed this new understanding. So
right, but here's the difference though. With the Supreme Court case, they're not saying that from now on the president is immune. They're saying the president's always been immune.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so
I mean, he's definitely getting his money's worth, man. I mean, he put those justices on the court, and they are delivering for him.
Well, so that may be the case, but what that does mean though is that the judge in his the 34 felony count trial, he delayed so sentencing was supposed to be a week from now, something like that, next Thursday or something. He delayed it, I think, 60 days to say, well, we'll do revisit sentencing then, if applicable. Like, it's very possible that this is going to open the door to saying, well, looking at the record and what the prosecution, that like, I'm going to vacate the sentence and just move on, because it's just not applicable. We can't apply that law because so many of his official acts were used in the context of a trial about his unofficial acts, which the Supreme Court says is as off limits. Mm-hmm. So, very interesting case, and I think. Immediately there's I'm part of Blue Sky, which is kind of like the ultra left version of Twitter. And okay. Immediately it's the people that were too left wing for Twitter and like, I can't stand it here.
Right. Too milk toast.
Yeah. So they all have these fantasies about like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. Biden can now order the assassination of his political rivals, and he's above the law. He can't be prosecuted.
That's right. He's given an order to a SEAL team.
But of course, he can be prosecuted because, bribery is still you can still prosecute bribery.
Not if it's attached to an official act. Not if it happened in some scope of all the things you just said, man.
No, and the idea here is that because there isn't anything about preventing a president from assassinating his political rivals that would impede his duties under the Constitution. So that kind of prosecution could still go forward.
But he has to talk to his military commanders in order to get it done, and that is protected. So therefore, it's all good.
as commander in chief, yeah, like whatever discussions he has with the generals, that's what happens.
Can't be
well, and that's not the way totally it would be done too, right? It would be like what was the case in the Middle Ages where this bishop was assassinated by
Becket. Who will rid me of this troublesome priest?
Yeah. Who will rid me? And he didn't actually say, go kill him. It was like, somebody needs to do something, like, okay, I guess I'll do it.
We got you, man. We got you.
We got you. So that one, I think, is a pretty wild case. I think he got a lot more immunity than I was expecting out of this thing. So I think it would be very hard now to prosecute the president for almost anything short of like I said, sort of like murder or bribery or treason, things that are impeachable anyway.
I think it's one of those things where be careful what you wish for, because I think all these conservatives that are super excited about this are going to be really pissed as more and more at some point, right now the Republicans are hanging on to power where they are because of gerrymandering and all these different things that allow them to retain power. But the demographics are not necessarily moving Republicans' way. So it's just, to me, it's one of those things where you're like, I don't know if that's going to be as exciting for you as you think it is. But or as somebody who believes in the ideals that this country was founded on, I do think that nobody is above the law, nor should they be. And the fact that they have just, I didn't know those different distinctions you just laid out. So the fact that, anybody could make a case that any of these things is attached to an official thing. And so therefore it's a get out of jail free card I don't know why that sounds appealing to anyone other than I'm a real fan of that guy and what they're doing to him is unfair. Okay, yeah.
So,
in that context, yeah, I'm all excited about it. But realizing that this now applies to anyone and everyone who ever becomes president in the future, I mean, it's not as exciting as you think it is.
well, so as I was thinking about this ruling, I thought you would really like it. And one of the things that you've talked about a bit on the podcast, but also privately, is that like you value the stability, political stability. Like you find it kind of irksome when the nation threatens to default because they can't pass a budget or
It's
something like that.
ridiculous. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, I do. Yeah.
So you value stability, and I think as we've watched the playbook of how to deal with your political enemies, right? It's not just the stuff that they're guilty of. It's the stuff that they could be made to appear that they're guilty of. And the stuff that you could make them go through this stuff. That it's like, well, do you really want Biden as soon as he leaves office to go through this exact same process?
Well, he's dead anyway. It doesn't matter.
Right. But like imagine Biden steps down, Harris gets into office. And Harris is whatever.
Yeah, that's my dream scenario.
Whatever. We'll just say, but just think about it. So Harris is in office. She's relatively young. She does a fine job. She leaves. Okay. After 4 years, she doesn't stand for re-election.
Why would she leave? She can now plot to overthrow the election and be completely immune. I mean, why would she? Whoever gets elected next is probably never leaving.
Let's just
put that out there.
Let's just say she leaves. And when she leaves, do you really want her to like, okay, now the next 15 years of your life is going to be being hauled into court and the timing of different things, and you're going to be tried in this state for this and that state for that, and this prosecutor and that prosecutor, and like, do you really want, like, it seems like that would be extremely destabilizing. That like, okay, whenever someone leaves office, time to go prosecute them.
Yeah, I've never bought into these analogies like that, because you've got in this particular case, Trump, and this is I don't see how you can disagree with this. I mean, whether you're a fan or not a fan of the Trumpster, right? There's some things I like, some things I don't like. In general, this was good for me, that was not good for me, whatever. I mean, but I think everybody can pretty much agree that, I mean, the guy did not follow or care to follow the law on most of these things. I mean, like, it's not okay to assault women. It's not okay to, make hush money payments and attempt to cover them up in order to win. I mean, that's legal. I'm not saying it's totally legal or illegal. I'm saying, look, people are upset at, for example, the Hunter Biden laptop story being suppressed, right? It was suppressed, and arguably multiple polling shows that had people known about that, Biden likely would not have won. Like that, there's been, and I think I'm more than happy to say that I believe that, so the actions in suppressing that story, right? Now, looking back, we can all go like, oh, it was totally legal. I mean, nobody's arm was twisted. Nobody was threatened. I mean, everybody was just kind of like, they wanted this guy in office. And so they buried the story. Where's the crime, right? We could go on and talk about that. And it doesn't invalidate the underlying premise, which is, look, suppressing that story was wrong. People had a right to know. And that was not cool at all. Now, what should the punishment be? Like, I mean, that's a totally separate conversation. I'm just talking about, is that correct or incorrect, right? Like, is that the right way to do things, right? And we can go back and look at a lot of these Trump actions, like, not the right way to do things, like, at all. And, I mean, I don't know anybody that's going to go around saying, oh yeah, this is how we want our president behaving. And these are, I mean, like, at the end of the day, look at George Bush Jr. as a great example, right? I disagreed with a ton of those policies. I think, frankly, I'm more than happy to say it, I think he should have been prosecuted for war crimes. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that administration did that were absolutely chargeable and go afterable things. And I wouldn't look at George Bush as an individual and say, that guy's out to like commit crimes or do whatever. I mean, like he, a decent person by all metrics, right? Who had some disastrous policies that killed a lot of people. We can all agree. I think that's what happened, right? Okay. So with Trump, like there wouldn't be a prosecution for him trying to steal the election had they not had all the different things that they did to try to steal that election. He wouldn't have had a prosecution about this assault had he not committed the assault. There wouldn't be no. Was it legal? Did it escape? Can we navigate it this way to make sure that he gets? Yeah, dude. Rich people have been getting out of paying the consequences of their crimes for a long time. Like, and sometimes poor people don't have to pay the consequences either, right? Like the justice system is not perfect. Should some crimes be charged and others not charged? Of course, I'm all about prosecutorial. I mean, big time. And about sentencing discretion from judges. Like it's okay for a judge to say, I fine you $1 and you're done, right? Like, I mean, to me, like the imposing of like minimum sentencing and all these different things that have happened over the past decades, I don't think really serve to mete out justice as much as they do to satisfy, some political itch that needs to be scratched, in a particular voting block,
Yeah.
Trump just, he both impeachments, right? Like you can go back and say, oh, well, this and that and the other, but dude, like we've heard the tapes, read the transcript. I mean, like he pressured this foreign leader to deliver something of political use for him in exchange for the money being sent. That happened. Now, whether or not, no, we're talking about, and Biden too. Biden, both of those guys.
It was about investigating Biden transferring money for political favors.
Correct. But he said, like, unless you give me that, then I'm not going to do this. So like he in trying to, and again, politically, and Trump doing the way he's done business for years, that's totally in character with the way he's done things for years. And I don't even object to it as a technique. I mean, like that leverage exists for a reason, right? On the other hand, like, is it a high crime and misdemeanor situation that it deserves impeachment? We can go on and on about like whether I think that was a good impeachment to have, right? But did he try to leverage this guy that way? Yes, he did. Right? Did he try to leverage the state of Georgia to find him some votes? Yes, he did. Did he try to do all these different things? He did. So like at some point you're like, well, I mean, it's just a shame that he's being prosecuted. Well, it's also a shame that he did the things in the first place. Yeah. To me, that's like where the rubber meets the road on that.
I think there's like two separate issues, right? So one issue is like what you're talking about, like, man, it seems like we've got a guy who plays fast and loose with the law, So okay. And then you've got this other issue, which is that we live in a time of really extraordinary prosecutorial creativity.
I mean,
and
again,
the other case,
when you apply it to this case, I'll even concede the point. Yes, they use some prosecutorial creativity. Are we living in a time where people in general are over prosecuted? I don't think so.
Well, so this is what the Jan 6 case is about. But if you're in a time where you've got a lot of prosecutors out there who are willing to take on politically motivated cases and are willing to read the law very creatively in order to get the indictments that they want, and if that's the reality that we're in, which I don't think anybody disputes, that's kind of where we are, then do you want the president, the office of the president, whoever occupies that office, to be hampered with that during their normal decision making? That like, not only do I have to worry about the stuff that's sort of clearly illegal, but I also have to worry about how some very enterprising prosecutor somewhere years from now might look at this and be like, that's a felony. I think if you read this one statute just the right way, that matches, and we got him, or we got her. And it's like, is that a world that you want? I think that is a less stable America.
I'm on the other side. That's why I would
think you would be in favor.
I think, yes, I want the president following the law. Yes, I want Congress people following the law. I want people that are making the laws, but also beholden to those laws that they're creating. So I just disagree with you.
Let's talk about the Jan 6 one real quick here.
Sure.
So this one is about the meaning of obstruction. So January 6th, for those of you who are following from overseas,
or otherwise living under a rock.
I know. There was a giant protest at the Capitol that turned into a riot, and then there's a dispute about whether that riot then was like an insurrection. There's been some politicians saying that it's an armed insurrection, but there were no weapons found, so it's probably not an armed insurrection. But maybe it was like a popular insurrection or uprising of some kind, or maybe it was just a riot. There's opinions will differ on that. So when they hauled a lot of these people into jail, the rest of them put them in jail, and then tried to figure out, well, what could we charge them with? And what a lot of people wanted them to be charged with was something like treason, and very few people could be charged with that. There was a few that it was like seditious something or other, which is kind of like a treason statute. There's like a very small handful of people that were charged with that. But it looks like everything else would have been trespassing, which is like a fine and then you go, right? The vast majority of the people that were there were not violent. There were some that were violent with police officers, but most were not. Thousands and thousands of people were there. They weren't all, throwing rocks. I mean, it was, so if you have someone non-violently walk through the Capitol and exit out the other side, it looks like the only thing that is applicable to them is trespassing. Looks like. Well, we can't have trespassing for an armed insurrection. That's way too weak. So there is a section buried in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which happened after Enron, because really funny. There was some laws about document preservation, and it was illegal. It was a felony to coerce someone to destroy documents on your behalf. But it was not against the law to destroy them yourself. And so Arthur Andersen, who was the accountant for Enron, was destroying its own documents. And when they tried to charge him with it, it's like, charge him with what? It's like, we didn't coerce anybody. We did it ourselves.
There's no coercion. We delightfully burned all that stuff.
It was a bonfire, document bonfire. So they changed the law and they said, okay, anybody that any destruction or alteration of records, whatever, that would impede an official investigation or official action is a felony, a potential 20-year felony. They were so outraged by this. Massive thing. Okay. Important. Then the other thing that they did was that they added a second section of this law. So, and it's important to get the correct reading here. So I'm just going to pull it up. So it's section 1512C, and the C has part 1 and part 2. So part 1 says, whoever corruptly alters, destroys, mutilates, or conceals a record, document, or other object, or attempts to do so with the intent to impair the object's integrity or availability for use in an official proceeding. Okay, so this is exactly what Arthur Andersen did. And then they added the second section. They said, or otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding or attempts to do so shall be fined or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. Right, so C2, right? So this is right under 1. So the government was like, look.
Well, this is an official proceeding. Oh, well, these people attempted to obstruct it. Yeah.
They obstructed it. 20-year felony. Now, what's wild about this is that this law has all sorts of section 1512, not just C. C has to do with documents. But there's a whole bunch of other ones for like jury tampering, like trying to bribe or coerce a juror is, I think, only a 3-year penalty, right? Like they were really into like, if you destroy the documents, we're coming.
Right.
But because C2 doesn't explicitly say otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes with regard to documents. It just says impedes.
Right.
Then the prosecutors looked at it and said, we found it. There's an official thing that's happening. They obstructed it, 20-year felony. So they charged something like 200 people with this offense because you didn't need to show that they were violent.
Yep. Freebie.
You didn't need to do anything. Several people, by the way, when they were indicted for this, committed suicide to spare their family the cost of having to try to defend them and like the shame of being charged with this massive felony for what for them was like literally no question of them being violent. They walked in, walked out, 20-year felony. So so the Supreme Court, in their majority opinion, and by the way, the majority included Biden's nominee, Justice Jackson. Interestingly enough, their thing said no. 1512C applies to documents, and so number one is a list of ways that documents could be altered or monkeyed with for official proceeding. And then two is sort of a catch-all for any other thing that could happen with documents.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, number one doesn't say, it talks about destroying, mutilating, concealing, but doesn't say things like inserting false documents into the record in an attempt to, impede the proceedings and so on.
Oh, so we do have rules. So we do have rules against misinformation. Nice.
Yes, for official proceeding, documents, and so on. But again, this is all part of a court cases involving documents. And since
go ahead. This one I pretty much agreed with anyway. But Jackson was not part of that. It was a 6-3 decision. Jackson
was a part of it. Barrett was with the dissent.
Yeah, well, on this page I'm looking at here, it's the other way around.
This is Fisher v. United States.
Fisher versus United States, 6-3. The three are Jackson, Kagan, and Sotomayor.
No,
is what it says on here, but
you're looking at the wrong thing.
Okay.
Here, I'll just prove it to you. Here is I'm sent you a link here. That is the Supreme Court opinion itself. And then if you look at the top, it says Roberts CJ delivered the opinion of the court in which Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Jackson joined. Jackson filed a concurring opinion. By the way, her concurring opinion is excellent. You should read it. Barrett filed a dissenting opinion, which Sotomayor and Kagan.
Well, they just have it. Yeah, you're right. They have it wrong on this page in two places.
So it's 6-3, yes, but Jackson and her. By the way, her concurrence was even stronger. Like she's from what I understand, she has a history of being sort of pro-defendant from her jurisprudence, and so this is kind of consistent being pro-defendant.
Yeah, I mean, as she should be, as all of us should be, frankly. But I mean,
yeah.
Apparently
not Barrett. Barrett hasn't seen a prosecution. She doesn't
take him to jail.
Whatever. They violated the law, So, so the idea here is that when you talk about like prosecutorial creativity, right? It's not just applied to presidents, right? It can be applied to ordinary people. There are people currently now sitting in jail for violating this law, which the Supreme Court has now said was just sort of that this maximum interpretation was used, in a political fashion to get people who we don't like. And Jackson and her concurrence said that she personally thinks that they were involved in an insurrection, right? Like that it has nothing to do with whether she agrees. She completely disagrees with what their cause was and what they were doing and their actions. So everything about it was wrong. But that doesn't mean that you can go find any law that looks like it might be close to it and read it in a way that is maximum possible power. Like otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding or attempts to do so. I mean, think about this. Someone's being arrested. You know how people like try to film the cops when they're arresting someone?
Sure. Yeah. What's my crime?
And then someone will pull out their phone like we're on camera or whatever. It's like,
what's he being charged with? We'll figure that out after we execute.
Well, here's the thing. Holding up the camera now and forcing the officer to engage with you, well, that obstructs, influences, and impedes an official proceeding. 20-year felony.
There you go.
Like if this is allowed to go on, right, any of us could be felons at any moment, right? And so basically, not only did they say you can't use this law this way, but it's a little bit of a warning shot. Like, don't do this.
Makes you wonder how anyone is ever convicted of anything.
Well, they're giving immunity away too easily.
Yeah, just whatever.
No,
man.
like
whatever
this.
You want.
I think.
You want.
I think this the Jan 6 stuff, regardless of what you think about people's motives or whether it was insurrection or not, like regardless of that stuff, I think it has really put some of our legal system to the test in a really strange way. I think we have like legitimate political prisoners in the United States that are being jailed. They would have otherwise been let go. I mean, you had people who were arrested for literally trying to burn down federal buildings in Portland, turned around and released the next day. No bail, no nothing. And you've got people who walked through the Capitol and are being, in prison for that right now. And so it's like, again, you could say like these people are awful and, they deserve our disapproval and opprobrium. But they fit the definition of a political prisoner. And that's kind of the situation we're in now. And the way that the prosecution has bent the law in order to get some kind of conviction for people who are nonviolent. Like, it wasn't just like, hey, let's find the people that punched police officers. It's like we're going to round them all up. We're going to get as many as we can. You're the bad guy. We're going to find some way to get you. We don't even know what you're guilty of yet. Well, it'll take us months to figure out which law will apply to you, but we're going to find it and you're going down. It's like, that is really strange kind of country to be living in. You just hope that you're never a part of something that some prosecutor out there, decides you're the bad guy and finds some
I
law
think
to
as a general practice, it's probably smart to stay away from riots. It may not be a good idea to storm the Capitol and try to stop the certification of a presidential vote. It may not be a good idea to attempt to, whatever. I mean, like,
that's the thing is,
this is what's crazy to me is like, well, if that's a crime, then this is a crime. Well, no, I mean, that's we can agree this is not a crime, but this is a crime. Like, this should not. But at the end of the day, like I think your point is well made, which is any of these statutes can be made to read any which way that you want. And so what is the law? It's whatever a good lawyer can sell a judge on it meaning, and that's, and we have a very good situation here where you've got, and dude, I agree with your point that the people that in Seattle, for example, who set up the Chaz or whatever you want to call it, like, I mean, why weren't people prosecuted there? They should have been, why did all the people who caused the 2008 financial meltdown, why were none of them prosecuted? They should have been, right? I mean, like, we can go down a whole list of things that, this person got away with it, so therefore that means it's totally okay to do. I can't make that leap,
so let me ask you this real quick. So you just said, what is the law? It's whatever a smart lawyer can get the judge to agree with, right? Okay. Now, rewind to our discussion about the immunity thing. And you said, I want a president that is not above the law. But you don't think you think the law is just whatever a good lawyer can get a judge to agree with. So it's like, what is above? There isn't anything to be above.
But that's I think we're in, I think we're in violent agreement here. The law is basically the law, and it's we're a country of laws. This is we believe in law and order. Whatever. Who cares? What does that even mean? It's whatever the party in power says it means. You get enough people, you pack this way, that way, or you get the right prosecutor in place. He's going after these people for things that aren't even crimes. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I think
make them look like crimes.
I think most people
maybe get some convictions.
I think most people are getting, well, exactly. So, I mean, like on either side, right? So you've got over aggressive prosecutors and you got over aggressive defense attorney. At the end of the day, like you've got people that are basically not contributing to a well-ordered society. Let's put it that way. Okay. So, I mean, to use the fuzziest possible terms that hopefully we can both agree with, I mean, that is not the way to run an orderly society. You can't have it's like I was trying to explain to one of my kids the other day. They're trying to move this piece on the chessboard the wrong way. Well, I want it to go over here. I'm like, but it doesn't move that way, you know. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, but I want to kill this piece. I'm like, okay, well, go ahead and kill this piece. Okay, so he kills a piece, and I go, okay, well, I don't want to play anymore. Why? No, you keep playing. I'm like, well, no, if you're not going to follow the rules, there is no game, you know? Mm-hmm. And so and the simplest games have the fewest rules, you know? But, and at the end of the day, like, I mean, the NFL is a great example, right? So like the NFL, you know, we put out and we say, okay, these are what the rules are. And then during the course of the season, you find things where people are using this rule the way it's written, but this over here isn't part of that. And so like, you know, whether it's deflating the ball or this or that, whatever the case may be, and now they have to come out with another rule, right? And so we're going to change the way that we calculate the free kick, you know, and because of this particular thing that went on, right?
Sure.
And I think, you know, leaving it in the realm of football, you know, nobody's going to get all riled up about, you know, oh, they're just coming after Alabama with that rule or whatever. Yeah, well, they are going after Alabama with that rule because Alabama was the one that was most. So and at the end of the day, like we're going to set new rules, and now next year, all of the teams are going to play according to these rules. And if we find something, we're not going to change the rules in the middle of the season, but we will at the end of the season adjust because we want people to keep playing NFL and watching NFL because that's how everybody makes money, right? And for some reason in the government and in politics, people get so married to one side or the other, and they can't realize that, look, you're trying to bend the rules to either go after this particular person or set of people, or you're trying to bend the rules to allow this person off the hook that you don't want to be, you know, unfairly, whatever the case may be. And at the end of the day, like nobody agrees on what the rules are or should be, you know. In fact, the book I'm reading, this constitutional book, the guy talks about, you know, in the Constitution, there's a provision to have you can call a constitutional convention to literally rewrite the Constitution. Like that's the provisions inside the Constitution.
Yep.
And then, you know, he kind of talks about like the difficulty of actually doing, let's say something like that could even happen. And let's say we could call a constitutional convention. The fact is, like, could you even get enough people to agree on, he was talking about like a real smart exercise that they tried to do was to write a family constitution. Hey, let's write a family constitution, set of rules that we can all agree what for this family. And he's like, it's me, my wife, and 3 kids. And we couldn't even, he goes, his oldest is like, we had a hard time, just the 5 of us agreeing on rules for our house. Right. Yeah. Because, well, if we put that rule, then that means this and this and this. Oh, I don't want that, you know? And so it's like back and forth. He goes, think about like these people, there was like 50 some odd people in this constitutional convention from these 13 colonies. And they had to get enough agreement around, you know, that. And he's like, this isn't an era where you've got Ben Franklin over in France trying to like, you know, get money to support the army so that they don't get like, you know, completely overrun by the British. And they don't even know, like they've sent Franklin instructions. It takes him 6 weeks to get. By the time that he's acting on their instructions and sending word back on his status update or whatever, I mean, it could have been 4 months. Like nobody even knows what's going on. And, you know, now you've got instant communication, instant this, instant that, and all the different, you know, people being able to whip up like flash mobs on the internet to like go after people for, you know, and who would even want their name attached to the Constitutional Convention? You know, like these are the 50 people that ruined your life, you know? I mean,
well, you know,
but my whole point is without a set of rules, you can't play the game. And at a certain point when the rules are shown to be meaningless and that nobody is really following them, I think the system collapses, which is your ultimate goal. So like we're getting close, bro.
Well, I think again, this is like, if you're a fan of stability, I think you should be a fan of this ruling, because as part of the fair notice aspect of laws. So like if you're going to be charged with something, we need to make sure that there's a law that was actually on the books that people could have known about. All right. And if it's like a completely new way of looking at this law, it's like, well, if you use this meaning in the dictionary for this, then, and it's like, well, I had no one could have known that was against the law. It's like, well, that's too bad.
Well, and on the record,
it's like
in isolation, this decision, I have no problem with it. It makes total sense.
I think if Congress wants to add something like, well, there's trespassing and there's also trespassing in the Capitol. Trespassing in the Capitol is worse for various reasons. And so here's a statute against this is now against the law. Here's the penalty for it. They could pass that, right? It's just there isn't anything on the books, So
that's maybe what that speaks to, is that there's a deficiency in. I mean, none of these Chaz people could get prosecuted, and these people shouldn't have been prosecuted either. I mean, like, I get it. There is one last one. I know we're like super.
The Chevron deference one.
Chevron, yeah. I'm a huge fan of this. I don't know
of what they did.
Yeah,
or of Chevron.
No, of what they did. So like,
say why. Explain.
Well, so Chevron basically is a decision that says that where a law may be ambiguous, the supervising agency. So let's say you have a law, like for example, the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act is super ambiguous in multiple places. And so Health and Human Services, the Secretary of HHS, which is a cabinet level person, and then their Health and Human Services, they get to write, here's how we're interpreting this. And
now this is beyond the parts where the Affordable Care Act says stuff like, the secretary will determine this part. This is because that's explicitly delegated.
That's explicit. That's explicitly
delegated. Ambiguous.
Just ambiguous. Where things are ambiguous, then the supervising cabinet authority, so it could be HUD, it could be whatever, they get to say this is how we're interpreting it. And then the courts have to defer to whatever the agency said the rule actually says.
Even if they think it's wrong.
Even if they think it's wrong.
Even correct. If 6 months ago, the agency said something completely opposite.
That's right. Well, and in fact, that's very likely could, because when you transition administrations, you've got, let's say you have very liberal people running HUD, and then now a Republican comes in, and so that Republican replaces, and so now you have very conservative people running HUD, and they interpret those rules totally differently, right? Like actually, and that happens all the time. And the court has to defer to that agency. Now, I think the way it's worked out in practice is that whoever is in charge of the executive tends to have their policies implemented the way that they want. What's going to happen now is that whoever's in charge of the executive is irrelevant, because these different things that are ambiguous can be challenged and the courts will decide. So I think that takes power away from the executive, which I am overwhelmingly a fan of. I think
better for stability.
Executive has way too much power and undesigned power. So like, I mean, I think if the founders could be resurrected and walk around, they would be shocked at all the power the executive has. So I think this is a very good thing. I do know that there are a couple of examples specifically that are not very good for maybe pet causes of mine or whatever the case may be. But to me, that's irrelevant. Like, what's more relevant is the structure, the underpinning structure. Is the structure more stable and more apt to generate better outcomes over time? Then I'm on the side of that, Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I 100% agree with the limitation on presidential power. I think that's a complete plus for this one. The other thing about it that really irked me about this tendency, so living in Texas is a very gun-friendly state, and there's some people are shocked by the kinds of weaponry that ordinary citizens are allowed to own and carry around here.
And carry around here. Yeah.
Yeah. So was a notorious weapon, the black rifle, the scary black rifle, the AR-15. Funny thing about it, there's a lot of accessories that can be put on it. It's like a Lego for weirdos. But one of the things,
people that want to look cool, I think.
Collection. You have your collection of Lego Star Wars. Here's my collection of AR-15s.
You're right.
I spent a lot of time building them. Whatever. Anyway, but there's various attachments to them that become legal and then illegal and then legal again. as the director of the ATF changes. And what's funny about it, and I think kind of alarming, is that because there was no change in legislation. It wasn't that Congress said, okay, yeah, this type of stock that is not allowed. Instead, it's the ATF saying, well, no, we're interpreting the law differently, but the law has always been on the books, which means that they've retroactively make those things illegal or legal. And so there's kind of this old joke that people in the AR-15 community talk about, like the boating accident. It's like, oh, what happened to your bump stocks? It's like, oh, they were in. I lost them in a boating accident. They're at the bottom of the lake somewhere. Which is just obviously. I mean, it's kind of a joke, but that's right before the ATF shoots your dog. That's the other.
Right.
Probably not so much of a joke.
Jackbooted thugs.
Yeah, but the idea that you could buy something and that was legal, and then 6 months later could be declared to have always been illegal. Is really weird, and that just that fact alone should mean that executive agencies shouldn't have this power.
Shouldn't have that power.
They should have the power. So this way, it's like, well, okay, it's going to go through a regular judicial process. You'll have briefs on both sides. The judge, who is an expert in reading texts of the law, will be able to make their decision. And then there's binding precedent after that. It's not 100%, but you have,
as we've now seen, not super binding.
Not super binding. It's not 100% binding, but it's like there's at least deference to the old rule, a lot of times to
whatever extent I feel like giving it.
Well, I mean, compared to presidential administrations, where Obama leaves office and Trump's like, how many things can I undo in the first 36 hours?
Yep.
Biden comes in, how many things can I do for Trump in the last 36 hours? And at least the justice system, that you don't have that. I mean, it's an improvement over that.
Right. Yeah. So, to me, I was a big fan of that. I would love to see the Supreme Court actually take up a case where they enforce that Congress is the one who declares war and not the president. I mean,
that would be amazing.
So many of these things are just outrageous, the way that it actually goes down in practice. A lot of, I feel for myself anyway, when I think about America or our system or whatever you want to call it, like that nebulous thing, right? The ideals, this country was founded on blah, 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 it's so far from what's actually going on in reality. I mean, what it actually is going on in the reality is this other thing. And I just, I don't know. It's some of the, I mean, what also, I think my last kind of comment on these decisions, because, some of them I think were very good, allowing women to continue to have access to the abortion pill, morning after pill, whatever you want to call it there. I mean, different.
I think that's a very logical decision.
Yeah. I don't really have the other one that's going to be huge here in Austin and also in California is being able to, clean up the streets and move homeless people into different areas where, is better geared to serve them,
We didn't talk about the homeless decision, the one about
to me, that's huge. And I think, conservatives.
Your city has a big issue with homelessness.
Conservatives and liberals alike, I think, actually are conservative and liberal administrations alike around the country are responding very positively to that. I mean, even we use the liberal scion of Gavin Newsom, in California, but being like, okay, great, now we can go to work and clean up this mess, and I hope they do. So, I mean, I just it'll be interesting to see that. I think that's and it's interesting too. Ironically, that in general, when it comes to enforcing different things, right? Like, let's say the border or, the homelessness issue or whatever it is, right? ironically, liberal administrations, and not liberals, but liberal administrations tend to be the ones that are more deferential to like the idea anyway of, oh, this is against the law, so we can't do it. Right. Or that's actually coming under challenge by this court, and so we can't do it. Versus conservative administrations tend to be like, screw it, we're going to do it and let them take us to court, and which I think is so interesting because progressive versus conservative should be on the other side. Like a conservative should be the one saying, well, we need to wait and figure out what the law actually says here. Whereas the progressive should be the one saying, let's push the boundaries and just see if they stop us. And it was interesting to me, like with immigration, for example, like here in Texas. I mean, our governor has been extremely creative in how he's gone after, different ideas that they put out there, like, oh, let's put these floats in the river, let's do all these different things, and then and as they do it, they'll get challenged, and oh, you can't do that, you got to take those out. Whereas Trump, the same way. Oh, we'll just set up these camps, and
the pathway needs to be open. We need more people.
We got or vice versa, right? Like Trump said, we'll close the border down, right? Like not let anybody in, and the courts come back and say you can't do that.
No, we got to let more people in. We need more people.
But it's not about letting more people in. It's about, like, the law says you cannot do that, right? And so, like, if you want to be able to do that, you need to write a new law, which is what the recent immigration legislation was to say, here will be on statute, not just some interpretation by ICE, but actually, like, statute says this, right? And right now, it's not any president's fault that the statute says if you come here and you ask for asylum, this is the process that has to be followed, right? So you can either choose to follow that process or decline to follow that process, but then you'll be in legal trouble with whatever. Trump just in general didn't care about the legal trouble because I'm never going to deal with that anyway. And then versus Biden's standpoint of, well, I mean, they're saying that's illegal, so we can't do that. And then finally decides, well, screw it, I'm going to do it anyway because something has to be done, because something does have to be done, right? And at some point you got to be like, well, look, I mean, let's let reality bump up against the law here and force the law to change rather than the other way around. It's interesting to see the different style and the idea that really, if you were truly conservative or if you were truly progressive, you would actually approach this a different way,
Well, that's a good point. And I think that's why I've really shied away from using conservative and liberal, because I don't know that those terms actually describe anything anymore.
Right.
Or like progressive, like progress. I mean, everybody wants progress. They just want progress in a different direction. We want to progress that way. You guys want to progress that way. And so,
well, but for years, conservatism, and I got to speak more knowledgeably about that because I grew up in a conservative environment. We did, but I mean, we studied that backwards and forwards. I mean, the whole essence behind conservatism is that the tradition and the way things were intended to be put together and how they were put together there should be more weight given to those things. Just because this is a good idea over here, or you're saying it's a good idea, let's wait, let's think, let's study, let's
maybe test it out over here for a little bit,
pilot it or whatever, right? But it has become, the meaning is totally different,
But that's the thing. It's like, I don't think so. Think about like your typical conservative party. It's like, Republicans don't look very conservative to me. And then like I look at, the liberal party, liberals, should be the ones to like enhance people's freedom, right? Liberty, right? Shouldn't this be like the freedom party? And like, no, they're the pro censorship party.
And pro surveillance party and pro surveillance party. I mean, yeah.
Right. So it's like if to say, oh yes, the Democrats, those are liberals. It's like, no, they're not.
Nah, not anymore. Yeah.
That party stands for technocratic, which, by the way, I'm not saying these as like good or bad, but they're technocratic. They prefer highly educated, sort of Ivy League, whatever. They're big business, pro-war, military-industrial complex. That's that party. And also they have certain views on gender and sexuality, race, and so on. And then you've got the Republican Party. They're not conservative. They're not trying to conserve anything, right? They're trying to destroy stuff, right? But it's a populist. They're like low regulation. Encourage small business, low taxation, and then they have family values. What do you think of as like family values, pieties?
Again, I laugh at this.
Pieties,
yeah,
not in practice.
Sanctimony is what they have.
Sure.
Yeah,
but in the same way, it's like what we all laugh about. Houston has an enormous LGBTQ population, and everybody complains about like June being Rainbow Capitalism Month. It's like everybody puts up the rainbows for the month, and it's like, oh, it's July 1st, take it all down. It's like, well, like no, it's not like you really care about this stuff. It's just
workers unite.
Yay,
Yeah.
And so like, yeah. So for the Republicans, the same kind of thing. It's like, oh, family values. Like, who's your nominee? Well,
but we really mean it, except for
family
him.
values anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Imperfect vessels. Imperfect.
Yes, we all believe in redemption.
Yeah.
Did I ever tell you that story about the French
forgiveness
newspaper?
for those who ask? Anyway, go ahead.
Did I ever tell you the story about the French newspaper that I can't remember who they were? It was someone who's running for president in France, and he was.
Who cares? How many republics have they even had over there?
Well, yeah. But
we don't store periodicals here.
Famously, he was unmarried,
okay.
But he had this mistress that lived with him and was like the first lady unofficially. They were sort of like, what title do we give her? So he's running for re-election, and someone from, I think it was American Press, asked one of his campaign people, it's like, hey, are you worried about any backlash about, him having a mistress as like the first lady or whatever? And the guy looks at him and was like,
this is France.
Like, yeah, says, this is France. This is a Catholic country. We understand sin and redemption. Like, what are you talking about? Like, how is that an issue here? Like, we understand.
Man. Come on, man.
We're a Catholic country.
Oh my goodness,
Family
dude! Good combo today, man. I wish I could keep it going longer, but we got to call it at some point.
Yeah. So hey, next week we definitely need to do something not political.
Yeah, for sure, dude.
All right, we've done two political ones
out today.
It's time to move on. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on, man. Screw it. All right, talk soon, man. Thanks again.
See you.